saying that I grew up as a pastor's kid, and I don't really know what my testimony is. That's exactly how I'm like, it's what I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Welcome to the Endeavor series. I am so glad that you're here. Today's episode will be my first solo episode sharing my story, who I am, how we got here, and the moments that shaped my testimony. I am beyond grateful for my family, friends, mentors, and Jesus. Whether you've been with me from the start or this is your first time tuning in, I hope you feel seen, inspired, and stirred to pursue your own endeavor with boldness. I am your host, Greysa Lemons.
I just watched your last podcast thing that came out today, and I thought it was so good. I think that's such a good conversation. But there was one specific thing that stood out to me because it's what I resonate with a lot, and I was wondering if you could possibly emphasize on it or give me some advice about it or even possibly make a whole episode on it because I think that'd be really cool. But anyways, when you're saying that I grew up as a pastor's kid and I don't really know what my testimony is, that's exactly how I'm like, it's what I've been thinking about a lot lately. And obviously I've been through things, but I've never had that moment. But I'm just wondering how you were able to get to the point of finding your testimony or how to share in those kind of moments. Thank you.
I thought that I didn't have a testimony at all. And so I want to share about what that looks like for those that feel like they have not had a testimony or are still trying to figure out what their story is, because everyone has a story. It's just figuring out what your endeavor is. Here we go. So I grew up in a Christian home, and gosh, how we all heard that intro before, but I didn't have a crazy coming from the world moment. And because of it, I thought I didn't have a testimony. I thought I didn't have a story. I thought I wasn't part of the God bigger picture story of kingdom, heaven on earth story. So, but I am a pastor's kid. I am a PK. I have such a deep love for pastor's kids out there. Well, love you guys, because man, what a story we have. What a life we live that's so just unique and different from most people's stories. But I am so grateful for my parents. Love you, Mom. Love you, Dad, for the way that you raised me. But basically, I realized later on in my life that my story and my testimony was a story of provision from a young age. And also that my story is still developing, because everybody's story is still developing, because the endeavor doesn't end until life ends. So, but I guess I want to go deeper in what I mean by why I thought I didn't have a story. Because I didn't have a coming from the world moment. I didn't feel like I was part of the God story. I felt like I had mentioned in, I think, episode 3 that I felt like I was the water boy of the faith, which just meant that maybe God didn't actually have something for me, that I was on the sidelines. Like my parents were the coaches. If we think about football, my parents were the coaches. The congregation were the athletes, the players, and I was neither. So I was the water boy. I'd just come in and help those that needed help, and then I was back and just waiting and ready to serve in my part. But I felt like I wasn't part of the game. I felt like I wasn't part of the God story. That healing was for them and that redemption was for them, but that wasn't really for me. I'm just here to serve. And so that was kind of how I felt. I remember the first time someone asking me what my testimony was, and I was like, I don't know. I would exaggerate my story just so that I felt like I had something to share, which is so sad. But yeah, I realized later that my story was still developing, so I want to get into that. But the moment that my story, I felt like, really began was in high school. It was the first time that I had experienced being around other believers my age at youth group, because I had gone to smaller churches growing up that didn't have other kids going there. I was like the only person my age there at the church. And so it wasn't until high school that my family was like, hey, we need to get you more involved with people your age as a believer as you're growing. And when I went to my first youth group experience, I met the meanest people on earth. Like, Christians were the most horrible people ever. And I'm being so honest and I'm being so real, because I had a pretty chill experience with friends and life and people up until high school, when I was like, dang, why are all of like my non-believer friends genuine, even if what they're doing is crazy? Like, at least they're genuine and they're kind and they're honest. And then the people that I had met or Christian lifestyle at my youth group was just so not for others. I think I learned the idea of why people say that Christians are living a life of hypocrisy. So that was my first experience of blow to the head, like, whoa, I didn't know that this existed. So I struggled with the idea of hypocrisy. How can unbelievers be genuine? Shouldn't we know better? I struggled with finding good Christian friendships. I was isolated, and I kind of became known as the lone wolf, like in high school in my area. And I mean, I had a lot of people that I could hang out with, but I didn't consider myself to have really deep grounded Christian solid friendships, because I just didn't understand why I couldn't find that in the Christian world. But yeah, I had the most incredible high school experience, and I had the absolute worst church experience, which is so interesting. Just trying to battle that. And then I later got, after high school, towards the end of high school, I later got into a serious relationship that was when I had learned for the first time about denominations and legalism. I always knew that there was Christians and unbelievers, but I didn't know there was such thing as division in the church until that moment. And so I had experienced that firsthand. And so, yeah, I think as someone who has lived under provision and under not helicopter, but protection and just so much love and how we should live our lives in my own family, I think whenever I was stepping out into the world, growing up and experiencing just the culture, I guess you could say, of how people live outside of my own culture that I grew up with, I was just very confused on how to navigate that. So, and I won't say, because no one can ever say that they didn't struggle with anything. Like, I definitely didn't struggle with nothing. I think I struggled a lot with identity, because I was having so many questions and so much pushback from believers more than I was from unbelievers about the authenticity of faith. So, yeah, it wasn't until the end of high school, beginning of college, that I finally spoke up about my faith. I experienced a lot of criticism, bullying from other believers and not non-believers, which was so interesting. I got a lot of backlash because of what I stood for in authenticity and faith. You know, why are we saying that we're living this life, but then on the sidelines, we're living a completely, totally different life? The crazy part is that I had non-believers who were very much, drug addicts or doing, crazy things with their life, that would message me and would literally tell me, like, wow, I've never seen somebody who actually is a believer, who's a Christian and actually walks the walk that they live. And because of the way that you live your life, like, I want to know more about Jesus, because I haven't seen that. And I think unfortunately, I think because we're all broken and we all, no one is going to get it right. I think a lot of times, out of maybe even wanting to love others, Christians can unintentionally hurt and, just hurt other people out of love, out of wanting to be out of love, but more out of anger. And I think a lot of people experience that side of Christianity, that they don't experience what truly kindness and love and assertiveness looks like. Because I think there's also this idea of, love and grace, but we let people run over us all the time and we don't actually have boundaries and order in our life. Or there's the two other far side of things where it's like boundaries and order, but we're condemning people and we're, not actually loving people. And so anyways, I learned a lot about what that looks like in balance growing up in high school and in college. But yeah, I experienced a lot of criticism and backlash from other believers more than non-believers. So that was just so confusing as a young person. Trying to figure out my own faith and trying to figure out how to walk my own life was literally the most confusing thing. And I remember telling my dad in the car one day, I was like, I don't even want to be a Christian anymore, because I was like, if this is what a Christian life looks like that sucks. That sucks. This is so hard. It wasn't hard for me to be a Christian in an ungodly world. It was like hard for me to be a Christian in my own Christian world. It was just so weird. But yeah, because I stood up about my faith and because I basically said something, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, because I think this was like the biggest endeavor of my life, because I lost all of my community of friends, of people, because I stood up for who I was. And then my family lost all of their community. I remember my family would receive nasty text messages. I faced a lot of very strange, non-accidental, almost contact with death situations where I had, it was definitely spiritual warfare, because we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against, the enemy. And so it was every time, right after I would speak up about a situation, and whether it was one-on-one with an individual, or if it was a group meeting setting where I was like, this is not right. It was 20 minutes after, I'm driving home, and I remember I was going I'm from a small town, open country roads, 60, 65, down a 2-lane, and there was a car on my lane, very obviously coming directly towards me and literally going 90 miles an hour. And at first I thought, I was like, oh, I think maybe just this person isn't paying attention. Maybe they're on their phone scrolling and they ended up accidentally being on the wrong side of the lane. But they weren't swerving at all. It was straight head on. They were just coming, and that was from a far away distance, and I had to literally drive off the side of the road and almost landed in a canal, because it was so and I don't even know what that was, but it was after every single time I'd stand up for my faith, I almost was in some sort of head-on collision, which was insane. And that's when I realized, it was dang, I remember my mom telling me, she's like, the enemy is after you, because he doesn't like when someone is grounded in their faith. So that was hard. It was scary. It was crazy. Yeah. And so obviously it's still something that I'm processing, because I'm literally so emotional right now through it. But I think the thing that makes me the most emotional is that the walk of faith is real. The walk of faith is so real that you're going to receive persecution from religious leaders. You're going to receive persecution from the world when you stand up for the things that that God is calling you to do. So, yeah, we went deep really fast. But this is good. I haven't shared my testimony too often. I also want to share this too. I think something that I really learned during my process in the end of high school and college is that I was a very confident person in high school, but I was very confident in myself and not necessarily confident in the Lord. And there's such a difference, because before I was like, oh, I have family, I have friends, I have community. Whether or not they were super deep, I was like, at least I can stick around with someone, I'm not alone and whatever. But when it got to a point where everything was stripped away from me because I stood up for what I knew was right, was when I was like, shoot, I can't put confidence in myself. I can't put an expectation that I can hold myself up, because when I have absolutely nothing, what am I going to lean on when I am not strong, when I'm not 100%? And that was when I had to learn that I had to lean everything on God. And I know that sounds so cliche, trust in the Lord, lean on God. But seriously, during those processes, I literally had to just be with my family and trust and pray and intercede and be so close with them in the Holy Spirit that that was the only thing that was able to keep us grounded. Because when you're experiencing spiritual warfare and you're experiencing crazy things in your life and there's no explanation for it, you literally feel like you're going insane. So you have to be grounded in the Word. So from that, I realized, like, okay, my testimony is actually still growing and still being transformed and still developing. Testimony doesn't just have to be before you knew Christ and then after you knew Christ. Like, it's also in the development of your story and your character and how you're being built in your process to where God is taking you, and to the finish line. And the finish line isn't the end of your story, of your testimony, how we normally know it as. The finish line is when we hear good and faithful servant at the end of the road. And so that's where I got my passion for being genuine in faith, because I saw it not happening so often, and I saw it being abused in a lot of areas. And then also I had this passion for canceling isolation and passivity and creating unity and purpose, because that's literally my life statement. Like, anytime someone tells me, what are you passionate about? I say genuine, being genuine, and canceling isolation and passivity and creating unity and purpose, because I experienced all of that. I experienced isolation because I wasn't passive in my faith. And so that's something that I'm so passionate about, and something that I've realized, like, this is my life story. So in college and high school, I mean, I was still facing this. I gotta be so honest. I feel like everything that I talked about is 10 times worse when you're in a small town. Like, when you're in a big environment, nobody really cares too much about drama so much, because everyone can just move on and find new friends. But when you're in a small town and everyone knows everyone's mom and uncle and goldfish, like, literally, the pettiness is insane. I'm just gonna be so real about that. So it was crazy. But yeah, God pulled me through. My family's prayers pulled me through. I didn't mention this before, but it was so crazy to the point where my parents' friends stopped being friends with him. My brother got bullied in high school. I remember, and I get emotional about this too, being a big sister, hearing that my brother got beat up in a locker room randomly because of my choice to stand up for my faith in religious circles. And he got his shoes stolen. And I was just like, dang, like, maybe I should. This is the point where I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe I should have been quiet. Maybe I shouldn't have had a voice, because obviously my family's hurting through this process. But my family was so adamant about, like, no, this is spiritual warfare and we're standing together in this. Wow, this is a lot more tears than laughing in this episode. But it's good. I think I want to be so honest, like, it's tears of, like, sadness and frustration when I'm remembering everything that I had gone through, but it's also tears of joy because I know where I'm sitting right now is so crazy, like, having two incredible friends being here with me during this process, and an amazing family who's still thriving in ministry. And so anyways, life happens, and then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, everything shut down. So everyone was experiencing isolation. And I decided that, number one, I was going to put my passion into creating something physical now. So now I take canceling isolation and passivity, creating unity and purpose, and I put it into creating Endeavor. And I started Endeavor in college, and it started off as a clothing brand, and that's kind of how I was able to spread my message through that. And then I also started hosting all of these huge, random, just fun hangout events. I would literally just tell anybody that was at college, like, hey, are you doing anything on Saturday? We're doing this big event. Come hang out with us. And they were just super simple, like swim party at my house, or hot air balloon fest, all those rodeo, all those small town events that they have. And it got so big, it got to like 50 to 60 people. And I was just trying to create something because obviously when COVID happened, there wasn't any community. And so I was trying to recreate community again. And I remember there was one guy afterwards that told me, he was like, hey, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to that event that you hosted, because I don't know anybody here. And because of that invite, I got connected with someone else that was in that group that actually told me about Jesus, and I gave my life to Jesus. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy, because I wasn't even marketing this as a Christian event. This was just out of the genuine passion to bring people together, that people are now wanting Jesus. And I think that altered my brain and my understanding of what being a Christian looks like. I think there's definitely something important about speaking up and using your voice and sharing the love of God. And there's also something super important about having your actions match your words, and everything that you do also represents Jesus and not just what you say. And so that's also another passion of mine, I think, because I've seen that happen. And people know, I think Christians might think that unbelievers are unaware, like, oh, they're rejecting Christ, they're not rejecting me. But in some cases, it's like, no, people are pretty smart. I feel like even people who aren't believers, even if they don't know what it is, have a discernment of, this is a genuine believer in Christ, or this is a phony. And so I think, yeah, people see that. And when they see that people are walking the walk, then they actually love and crave Jesus more because they see Jesus in their life. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my story. Yeah, that began my journey, honestly, of Endeavor. 4 years later, here I am doing the Endeavor series. But I will be so honest that the backlash definitely got so bad back home that God was able to give me an avenue to move. And so I moved down south, and I'm still here now. I was able to do grad school at Vanguard University. And of course, the Endeavor doesn't stop. And so I'm facing the exact same things that I was facing at home, but here now in this area, and definitely not to the extent as I was facing at home, but just kind of like having to deal with the same systems or principles of like, we need to be who we say where we're at, whether that was literally at college or in business. So yeah, I think that's also a time that I realized that this is spiritual warfare, because this isn't something that's happening just in my small town. This is happening wherever I go. And it's challenged me to be more open and vulnerable about using my voice more. Yeah, so I think there's always been some sort of like, the enemy has had something on my voice to not speak. And the more that I speak, the more things happen. And I've decided that during the Endeavor series, this is where I'm going to stop being back behind the curtain and start actually like walking into my Esther season, is what I keep calling it recently. But yeah, I guess to kind of wrap up, because I just wanted to just be so short and so frank and just to the point with my testimony and my story, is that I'm still going, but my confidence is with Christ now. It's not in me anymore. I don't believe that my testimony is over. And yeah, if you are also experiencing the feeling of, where do I fit in this kingdom on earth? Where do I fit in the God story? Because maybe you're PK, or you didn't have a crazy testimony that everyone's like, oh my gosh, what a roller coaster of a story. You do have a story. You do, even if it is just provision, because just provision is actually such a powerful thing that I think we kind of overlook, because we might glorify the testimony part than the idea of what God is actually doing in our life, which is so crazy, yeah, your story of provision is powerful. And I might do another episode on PKs specifically, because that's also another passion that I have. Yeah, I could go on about that. But anyways, love you guys. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sending in questions, things that you have wonderings about. Because I love that. I love the conversation, and I love how we can be inspired by it, encourage each other, and start living it out in our lives. Love you guys.